Hey, Larken Rose here, and I wanted to do a quick video about the concept of expertise and experts. And that concept has come up quite a bit in recent years, as you may have noticed. And so now there's arguing back and forth a lot between people who say, well, you have to respect degrees and expertise, and these people went through 1 billion years of education and are experts. And the other people are like, well, I looked up something on YouTube and it said something different. And as often happens, both sides of the debate often annoy me. Because yes, there absolutely is such a thing as somebody who studies something and focuses something on a particular field of thought and gets way, way, way more knowledgeable about that field of thought than the general public. Now, one weird thing that happens is that people aren't even specific about what the field of thought is. Like, oh, he seems like a smart person and he has letters after his name, so his opinion on anything must be informed. Like, no, that's not how that works. Somebody can have a whole lot of knowledge in one field and be utterly clueless about lots and lots of other things. But let's stick to a particular field and expertise in a particular field, because there are several factors. First of all, yes, it is totally true that somebody who focuses in a particular field of thought and is actually looking at the data and reviewing evidence and trying to better understand how things work, that person is very likely to have a way better understanding of the concepts and the terminology than the general public. And so, yes, there is totally such a thing as expertise. Now, one of the main problems is if you're one of the people who didn't do that and you're listening to an expert with credentials, how are you supposed to know if they're actually an expert or not? Well, they say they are and they have letters after their name and they have a degree. Okay, hopefully, and in an ideal world, that would indicate them actually understanding a bunch of things. And in a lot of cases, it does, like people who get degrees in physics usually know something about physics, more so than the rest of the world. But if you're the person seeing the credentials in some field of thought that you're not an expert in, you're still just going, well, I hope he's an expert. Like, maybe I'll take his word for it. I'll defer to him based on the assumption that he should know better than I do, given the education that he presumably had. The thing is, in a lot of fields of thought, what is pushed is whatever people think today. So they go through a textbook. It's just a way more sophisticated and in-depth version of like getting a high school diploma. It's like, well, I memorized these things in the book and I spouted them back and I got an A. Good for you. Were the things in the book true? I don't know. It wasn't my job to question them. It was just my job to memorize them and spew them back. And I would particularly point to the medical industry as an example of that. They are taught whatever the current textbooks say. And what makes it so funny to always view them as experts, to view doctors as experts who you should never question, is that what their textbooks say changes every 5 minutes. Like, they find out new things. They find out they were hugely wrong about that and that and that and that, and they change their opinion about this and this. And so in a field where the ideas and the evidence is changing, the idea that letters after your name means you must be right is just ridiculous, especially in a field of thought where that's been changing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for literally centuries. And that is absolutely true of medical science. So there are people who really are experts in particular fields of medical science, like, well, we really study the effects of this on this, and they may know a whole lot about that, and they may assume a whole bunch about other things related to medicine just because that's what they were taught in their education when they were going to medical school. And a lot of that has proven to be wrong and has changed, and a lot of what they teach in medical school now doesn't match what they taught in medical school not that long ago, because they figured out, oh, it turns out that doesn't actually do any good, and this does this, and this is caused by that, not this. And guess what? The same thing is going to be true in another 10 years and 20 years, that they're going to change what they're teaching as the understanding changes. Now, there's a bias built into that, too, because in a not at all free market, which is what we have, you get government incentives and big pharma incentives for the medical industry to focus on a particular set of solutions and cures that aren't cures and keep people dependent on crappy medicines. So there is a financial and a political incentive for experts to push in one direction and ignore things that wouldn't make them any money. So for example, if you're going to some surgeon, and this is just a people thing, it's not because doctors are like inherently evil. You go to some surgeon and they could either say, oh, well, like you have some problem that's starting to show up, but if you just fix this about your diet, you're fine. Like, so they get paid for one consultation and they're done. Or they could say, oh, well, I know a surgery that would undo what we see here, and it'll only cost you $50 gazillion billion. Oh, actually, if you have life insurance or health insurance, you won't even know what it's going to cost you because you're just going to pay your ever-increasing health insurance premiums, and then we're going to bill your insurance company for $57,962, which you'll never know unless you bother to find out. And so that person has a huge incentive to sort of side with the thing that makes him a bunch of money instead of siding the thing which may be just as useful and makes him nothing and is way better for you. So that's even without authoritarian power messing it up, and that does make it way, 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 way worse. There's already just the human incentive of experts to have this nudge in the direction of things that get them favor. Another example of that is the experts who want to study something that they know fits a government agenda and therefore is likely to get them a government grant. So if you go, I want to study the effects of global warming on pangolin farts. Oh, here's 12 million billion trillion dollars, because right now the political parasites are trying to push that agenda and have everybody talking about it. Doesn't mean it's of any use. And it almost guarantees that your research is going to match their agenda from the get-go, because they're paying you to study something with a foregone conclusion. Because if you end up with a different conclusion, suddenly, well, you're not getting any more grants from us, and maybe we'll sort of squelch your findings and shut you up. And next, we'll give our money to somebody else, or in the case of government, they're not giving their own money. We'll give somebody else's money to somebody else who's going to do a study, the results of which support our bullshit authoritarian agenda. So there's just human nature plus political and economic power make it so that experts are often not going to be experts. And the thing is, this gets missed in a lot of the discussions because people are arguing whether, well, I went to school for this many years, so I'm an expert. Well, I'm a free thinker and I do my own research, so I don't trust your expertise. Like, if that's the realm of discussion, I would pretty often side with the supposed experts. Not nearly all the time, but a lot of them actually have a bunch of education. But most of those discussions leave out the fact that these experts are people, and they're therefore prone to do things that people do, like lie, get paid to lie. In the last few years was a shining example of lots and lots of experts being paid to lie to serve the agenda of big pharma and to serve a political agenda. And they absolutely lied. If you look at people like Fauci, he's not mistaken. The problem isn't that he's an expert but got something wrong. It's that he's a slimeball, opportunistic, lying piece of shit. That's the problem. So his expertise is completely irrelevant because his conclusions weren't the result of, I'm going to examine evidence until I understand this and then I'm going to tell people what I find. It has nothing to do with that. He's a soulless parasite, whether he's an expert or not. He's a liar. And so that's the first level of, well, they went to school for 1 billion years. Yeah, and then they got offered tons of money to agree with the government agenda. What do they get offered if they're the same experts with the same experience the same study and they go, wait, you're wrong about this. Well, we have several years of example. They get shunned, they get defunded, they get demonized and mischaracterized and hated and barraged and censored and silenced and harassed all over the place. We saw that. Now, for all the people going, well, I trust the experts in government. Did you not notice all the other actual experts saying they're not telling the truth and they got stomped on and silenced? Why did their expertise count for nothing? Well, because they don't match authority. Okay, that isn't you trusting the experts. That's you falling for the logical fallacy of appeal to authority, of these people saying, well, we're big and bad and we'll squash you if you disagree with us. The science is settled, because anybody who comes up and says, wait, you're wrong about that, no matter how many degrees and no matter how many zillion years they've been studying it, they get stomped and smashed into the ground. So the expertise becomes irrelevant. Like, the person may know, but they got paid to lie. Here's the final component, which is actually an even bigger factor, and it's really damn sad. Because a lot of actual experts who have they've done lots of study, they understand fields of thought in whatever field of thought you're talking about, they're not paid liars. They won't go out and lie. But they're spineless cowards who have a lot to lose. And that describes most doctors. It describes most scientists. They're spineless fucking cowards. And in addition to the small number of absolute liars, the people who were paid to lie their asses off to enrich Big Pharma for several years, we know them, we saw a bunch of them, but there are 100 or 1,000 times as many people who weren't paid to lie their asses off, but they were too fucking cowardly to say, this isn't true. Every epidemiologist, every virologist, even if whether or not you want to accept the mainstream view of how those things work, they all knew, every single fucking one of them knew the government was lying when they pretended natural immunity wasn't a thing. Every epidemiologist who didn't say, what the fuck are you talking about, is a fucking coward, and that's most of them. Because they're like, well, I have my little career here and I don't want to risk it by using my expertise to say they're totally fucking lying. We all know that isn't how it works. That's like, none of this makes any sense. The lockdowns, the idea of stopping a contagion, we've never been able to do that at any point in history. So when you talk about maybe slowing it down for 2 weeks, all right, that's debatable. But to continue it as if we're going to make people not get it, that's ridiculous. That's idiotic. And every epidemiologist, every virologist knew that. It's the most basic thing. Because they understand, okay, well, we've never been able to do this. We tried to do this. We learned to do this. We tried to do that. They all knew that natural immunity would be better. They all knew that, which means every single frickin' one who didn't have the spine to stand up and go, they're lying, that's not how this works, is a coward and an enabler of evil, even if they're not receiving a paycheck for it. They weren't paid to lie. They were just intimidated into not saying anything. Every one of those experts who was actually an expert in their own head, like they knew the stuff, they knew the evidence they had spent years studying, they just completely threw out the window any reason for anybody to ever trust their expertise ever again, because they demonstrated that for all their learning and for all their knowledge, they would remain silent in the face of a gigantic lie if they thought it might cost them something. Which means their expert opinion is now absolutely worthless. No matter what the education, the knowledge, the understanding they have, their expert opinion is absolutely worthless. And that is true of most doctors who didn't stand up and say, this is ridiculous what you're pushing on people. Even the ones who quietly said it to patients, which I know a bunch of, but wouldn't stand up and say, this is wrong. You're pushing a jab on little kids when it doesn't do them any good. Statistically, there's no threat to their lives. Zero, except there is from this jab that you're trying to make them get. and all the other things that every single doctor knew was bullshit. And a bunch of them at least had the spine to quietly tell their patients that. But if they didn't have the spine to stand up and go, this is wrong, they're absolutely lying, that isn't at all how anything works. Anybody who has a medical degree already knows that they're lying their ass off even about the most basic stuff. The vast majority of doctors didn't have the spine to say that. A few did, and they got attacked, and they stood up for themselves, and you get a bunch of them grouping together to try to make their voices louder, and good for them. But as far as deferring to experts, all of the other experts just demonstrated that you can't trust them, you can't defer to them, not because they don't know the truth, but because they don't have the balls to state the truth when authority is lying. Which means they don't deserve anybody's trust ever again. If your doctor pushed this thing or didn't speak out against it, just about the obvious parts of it that any doctor would know is a lie, then why would you ever trust him again? He's demonstrated your well-being matters less to him than his career and his paycheck and his reputation. He will quietly allow a gigantic lie to endanger millions and millions of people's lives rather than stand up and say, I actually know something about this and what they're saying isn't at all true and here's why. So a huge number of experts who are actually experts just demonstrated one of the biggest reasons you don't defer to experts. You don't just blindly believe them and go, well, you have a degree, I guess I'll do what you say. Because some of them are paid liars, and a hell of a lot more than that are absolute stinking cowards. And the vast majority of the medical industry demonstrated that they're absolute stinking cowards by going along with this and not speaking out when they knew damn well it was based on lie after lie after lie. And now when the mainstream comes out, oh, it turns out that, no, it didn't turn out that. Some of us were saying it the whole time, and any doctor worth his salt, any scientist who's looked into this for more than 5 minutes already knew that from the beginning. I knew it from the beginning, and I don't have any formal education in those areas. And all the things I was saying at the beginning, now one by one they're saying, oh, turns out the masks don't really work. Oh, turns out the shutdowns didn't do any good for that and did massive harm in so many other areas. With drug addiction and domestic abuse and depression. Now they're talking about, oh, we never could have foreseen this. Yeah, you could have. And all of you who remained silent on it, all of you actual experts with credentials, you just demonstrated to the world that they shouldn't ever trust you ever again. And the fact that you have a degree and you have expertise, even if the expertise is real, doesn't mean that anyone can ever trust you again, ever again, because you're a spineless piece of shit who sold out humanity because you didn't want to endanger your reputation by actually using your expertise to say they're wrong, they're lying, don't let them do this. And unfortunately, that's just a human thing, because when somebody gets a degree, they're still just a human being. And the fact of the matter is, most people, hopefully a small number of people, can be bought and paid for and will go out and just lie their asses off for a paycheck. But a huge group of people, when it's their chance to stay up, to stand up and resist a lie and injustice, they're going to hide in a corner like a freaking coward. And most of the medical industry demonstrated that they are just that. They are cowardly wusses. They are pushovers because they have something to lose, and they will go along with an absolutely dishonest, 100% anti-scientific, anti-human, immoral agenda, rather than maybe risk losing something by saying what they know to be the truth. So, to all you experts out there who are now complaining, why don't people trust the experts? Did you speak up against the lie? Because I don't care how much you understood and how much your education, how much you know in that field of thought. If you didn't stand up and speak the truth, then you are the frickin' reason people don't trust actual experts because lots of actual experts just demonstrated that they're a bunch of spineless fucking cowards.